thank you for joining us. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you. It's wonderful finally being back to PI after this long absence.
Well, thank you for coming. And I was struggling with ways to introduce you to our audience because there's so many things that, theoretical physicist and author and world traveler and philosopher. So I decided I didn't want to introduce you. I want you to tell me, pretend I'm a stranger on a plane and I've just sat down next to you and I buckled up and I say, hey, what do you do for a living?
That's a bad way. I would say, hi, my name is Carlo. I was born in Italy and I go around and talk with people. I have ideas. I try to do them. What about you?
I talk to people like you trying to figure out what they do. So it's a good thing we're sat next to each other on this plane. You didn't mention theoretical physics. Is that because what you consider yourself doing is more just talking to people about a variety of subjects?
No, it's if you have to define me what I am, primarily I'm definitely a theoretical physicist. The rest of the things that I do are in part motivating, part around that. So my competence, if I have any, it's in theoretical physics. I don't like to define myself, even in front of myself. So I like to keep, things open. And when I started writing books for the large public, there was a moment in which I was telling myself, wait a moment, are you just turning into a writer instead of a scientist? And then I realized that this is a meaningless question. I'm just doing what I'm doing and things are connected. The only meaningful question is how many hours I devote for one and the other. That's maybe a question.
Right. Well, I ask partly because you're currently, you have a position in London, Ontario at the Rotman School of Philosophy, which seems, at least on the surface, to be a strange place for a theoretical physicist to be. Can you explain what you're doing at a school of philosophy?
I talk with philosophers. I love to talk with philosophers because I think it's useful for physics. I have this conviction since a long time. I was interested in philosophy since I've been interested in philosophy since I was a kid. I guess when I was a student studying physics, I also continued to study philosophy. And I think that the clear-cut separation is a bit artificial and is damaging for both disciplines.
How so?
Well, first of all, of course, not all physics needs to talk with philosophy. In fact, most of physics does not need to talk with philosophy. If you have to, solve the Maxwell equations for a certain antenna, you just might happily ignore philosophers for that particular problem. And a lot of physics is just concrete, specific problems.
Right.
But of course, there's a part of physics which is not to apply knowledge that we have for solving problems, is to find out what is the knowledge we have at the basis. And that part, it's a kind of things that, Einstein, Maxwell, or Newton, or Galileo, Boltzmann were doing, or Heisenberg. And that kind of activity traditionally was done by people who were schooled in philosophy. I mean, Einstein had deep knowledge of philosophy, and so Heisenberg and certainly Newton, Galileo, he was an avid reader of Aristotle. Because there's a mistake in the understanding of physics and science in general. Science is just collecting data and writing equations that predict this data. I mean, that's just a little part of it.
Mm-hmm.
The largest part of it is figuring out a set of a conceptual structure, how to think about that. When you go from, the Ptolemaic to the Copernican system, you don't just collect data and make, you rearrange the order of the world in a different way. And you do the same that's what Einstein did, that's what Maxwell and Faraday did, that's what Heisenberg did, and Boltzmann and so on. So the core problems in fundamental physics today, like quantum gravity, the problem in which I am, do require the same kind of rethinking the conceptual basis of a discipline. And the philosophers are very good in that. Not because they solve the problem of physics. I mean, relativity was found by Einstein, it was a physicist, not a philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a physicist who was listening to what the philosophers were saying. Philosophy has a capacity of critical thinking, which is very deep, has imagination. Philosophers come out with completely different ways of thinking about reality. Sometimes crazy, we don't care about them, but that's not the point. Sometimes very useful.
Sometimes I think the theoretical physicists come up with ideas of reality that strike me as crazy too. And
sometimes they do, sometimes even perhaps too much crazy. And you should listen to philosophers who say, wait, come on, don't exaggerate, guys.
Yeah.
Are there certain open questions in physics that you think would most benefit from input from philosophers?
Yes, and they change, of course, because physics is a process, and right now, the number of open questions where philosophical thinking, philosophical clarity is useful. Some of them, for instance, have to do with time. In trying to write a quantum theory of gravity, of course, space and time have to change, because now we're looking at the quantum property of space and time. And we have so many prejudices about how space should be, and how time should be. And a careful philosophical analysis of what we know, I find it useful. That's one of the things I'm exchanging with philosophers I'm in touch with. Even in simple things, one very well-known problem about time is that the past is different from the future. And so what's the root of this difference between past and future? Is that something intrinsic in time by itself or not? And the answer is not just academic. Well, yeah, it is academic. But the question is important, because if we want to understand more, to understand how quantum gravity works, we have to get clarity about these things. So the nature of time it's one. The nature of observer is another one. We now are in this funny situation with quantum mechanics, which is a fantastically good theory, but it's formulated in terms of an observer. So why do you need a guy with a PhD in physics to formulate, to understand how the things work? No, I mean, things work by themselves without an observer. So how to make sense of that? Mm-hmm. And these are questions that physicists have been struggling with, and they will come out with a solution. I think solutions are being debated, they're on the table. But philosophers can listen, contribute, and provide perspective.
I was struck when I have your book here, Reality is Not What It Seems, about quantum gravity, and we'll get more into quantum gravity, but what struck me most was the book essentially begins with the ancient Greeks. Quantum gravity and loop quantum gravity are relatively new fields of physics, but to explain them, you went back thousands of years. Can you tell us what inspired you to go so far back to bring us to the present of quantum gravity?
That book, Reality is Not What It Seems, it's actually the first popular book that I wrote about science. And I wrote it quite late, after so many people had told me, why don't you write a popular book about quantum gravity? It was at least 20 years that people were telling me that and pushing. And some publishers also. Come on, Carlo, you write nice. Why don't you write a book? You have this beautiful science. Why don't you write about that? Also because people were sick and tired with string theory. I mean, just can't stand string theory anymore. So let's do some good quantum gravity. But I didn't know how to do it, because how do you tell quantum gravity to people, right? I mean, you have to digest general relativity, you have to digest quantum mechanics. It's a long story. So for long I hesitated, because I wanted to do physics and not waste time writing. Then I started considering the idea, but I couldn't find the right way. Mm-hmm. And then it was a flash. I had so many things to do, but I couldn't organize them. And I mentioned in one of the preface of my books, and I don't remember which edition, I was driving from Italy to France, where I had moved at the time, and in the middle of the night. And then I said, well, I need to explain this concept. I need to explain this concept. I need to explain this concept. I need to tell the reader what is a field, is electric field.